Most people believe memory loss is simply the price of getting older, that after a certain age, forgetting names, losing focus, or feeling mentally slower is unavoidable. But what if that belief is quietly misleading you? What if memory decline after 60 doesn't begin with age itself, but with signals the brain slowly stops receiving? If you're over 60, this matters more than it sounds because the earliest changes linked to cognitive decline don't start with dramatic symptoms. They begin subtly, years earlier, when brain cells lose efficiency, communication weakens, and mental energy drops just enough to go unnoticed. According to newer research in neuroscience and brain nutrition, memory decline is not driven by genetics alone, and it doesn't suddenly appear one day. It's shaped daily, often silently, by the foods that support, or fail to support, brain health. And here's the question most people never ask. If two seniors eat what they believe is a healthy diet, why does one maintain sharper memory while the other experiences increasing brain fog year after year? Did you know that many people who think they are eating well are still sending weak or confusing signals to their memory cells? Research on brain aging suggests that after 60, the brain no longer responds to general advice or random habits. Instead, it waits for very specific biological cues before it supports recall, attention, and mental stamina. That's critical because once the aging brain begins ignoring weak signals, memory decline can speed up quietly without obvious warning signs. Here's the part most people never hear. Aging brains are not passive. They don't simply shut down, they adapt. But adaptation only happens when the message is clear, consistent, and strong enough to be trusted. This leads to an important realization for anyone focused on brain health after 60. Not every healthy choice actually strengthens memory. So the real question becomes, what kind of daily signal does an aging brain truly recognize as worth responding to? This is why so many people try supplements, brain games, or lifestyle changes and feel only small or temporary improvement. The effort isn't wrong, the order is. And that insight opens the door to hope, because growing research on science-backed brain foods shows that when the right memory-supporting signals arrive in the right sequence, brain cells can respond more clearly than most people expect, even later in life. In this video, you'll discover why certain science-backed foods play a far greater role in strengthening memory, how timing and sequence influence brain health, and why many people stop just before the brain truly begins to respond. In a moment, we'll begin the countdown, starting with the signal most people rely on too early, then moving step by step toward the one memory cells recognize most strongly. Memory decline rarely announces itself loudly. It doesn't arrive as a clear warning or a single dramatic moment. Instead, it works quietly in the background, slowly changing how brain cells communicate, how energy is produced, and how memories are stored and retrieved. If you're over 60, this is the real threat most people miss. By the time memory problems feel obvious, the biological process behind memory decline has often been active for years. According to growing research in neurology, this silent shift can weaken memory pathways long before anything feels wrong, which is why so many older adults are caught off guard. You may still function well, live independently, and feel sharp most days, yet inside the brain, critical support signals may already be fading. And here's the unsettling question. What if doing nothing feels safe, but is actually the riskiest choice for brain health after 60? This is where concern naturally enters the picture, because once brain cells stop receiving clear support signals, they don't fail all at once. They slowly disengage. Focus becomes harder to sustain. Recall takes longer. Mental stamina shortens. These changes are easy to blame on stress or aging, but brain aging research suggests something deeper is happening. After 60, the brain becomes more selective. It no longer responds well to weak, inconsistent inputs. It either receives a strong, meaningful message, or it gradually shifts into a lower function mode. And that raises a critical curiosity for anyone trying to improve memory naturally. If the brain is still listening, what exactly is it waiting for? And how would you know when you're finally sending the right message? The good news is that this process is not one way. Aging brains are not broken brains. Research increasingly shows the brain remains responsive far longer than most people believe, but only when it receives the right kind of support. This is where hope enters the story, because specific everyday biological signals can help maintain memory chemistry, protect communication pathways, and support the systems most vulnerable to cognitive decline. Not extreme interventions. Not complicated protocols. Signals the brain recognizes as familiar, safe, and worth responding to. And here's the question that changes everything. What if you've already been around those signals? The same types found in science-backed brain foods. But you've been using them in a way your brain can't fully interpret? That's why so many people feel frustrated. They change habits, try supplements, stay mentally active, yet results feel modest or temporary. The effort is real, but the response is muted, not because the brain is incapable, but because the message hasn't been clear enough. When signals arrive out of order or without reinforcement, the brain hesitates. But when they arrive correctly, something changes. Memory systems don't just stabilize, they become more responsive. And the next question becomes almost unavoidable. If response is possible, what does the right order actually look like in real life? With meals, routines, and the way seniors actually live? In this video, I'll show you how this process works naturally, why certain science-backed signals matter more than others, and how the brain responds when those signals are delivered the right way. We'll move step by step so you can understand not just what helps, but why it helps, and why order makes such a difference. And in the next section, we'll begin breaking this down carefully, starting with the first signal most people rely on, and why it's only the beginning. According to researchers at Harvard Medical School and other major neuroscience centers, memory decline is closely linked to how well brain cells communicate and maintain their energy systems as we age. In simple terms, memory problems are less about losing brain cells and more about those cells struggling to communicate efficiently. That's why many seniors notice recall feels slower or more effortful, even though they're still intelligent and capable. And here's the key question to hold on to. If communication is the issue, what actually helps brain cells stay connected? And which healthy habits don't move the needle for memory health after 60? A 2023 review in Nutritional Neuroscience found that the aging brain becomes far more selective about the signals it responds to, especially after 60. In everyday language, this means the brain no longer reacts to weak or mixed messages the way it did at 40 or 50. That's why so many older adults say they're doing all the right things, but still feel mentally tired or foggy by midday. If the brain is filtering signals more strictly now, it makes you wonder which ones still get through, and which ones are being quietly ignored, even when your intentions are good. And that leads to a practical curiosity. If the brain is more selective, what kinds of daily inputs still count as strong signals? Researchers also point out that memory chemistry depends heavily on how stable the brain's internal environment remains over time. In simple terms, the brain works best when inflammation stays low and fuel delivery stays steady. This helps explain why some seniors feel mentally sharp in the morning, but noticeably slower by afternoon, even on calm days at home. And it raises another question many people overlook. If daily swings affect memory this much, what happens when brain support becomes consistent? Not perfect, just consistent. According to multiple long-term studies, the brain does not suddenly give up with age. It adapts. Put plainly, it changes how it listens. That's why advice that worked years ago may feel less effective now. Many people over 60 describe this as frustration. They try harder but see smaller returns. Yet that same adaptive nature is also hopeful because it means the brain is still responding, just more cautiously. So the real question becomes, what kind of message does an aging brain actually trust enough to respond to? And why do some messages get ignored? Scientists studying cognitive aging often emphasize that clarity matters more than intensity. In simple language, piling on random strategies doesn't help if the brain can't interpret the signal. This explains why some seniors feel brief improvement, then slip back into the same patterns. The brain tested the message, didn't find it convincing enough, and moved on. But what happens when the message is clear, familiar, and repeated in a way the brain recognizes? And what if the right message is simpler and more food-based than you've been told? According to experts, when support signals are delivered correctly, the brain doesn't just slow decline. It becomes more responsive. In everyday terms, memory doesn't feel forced anymore. It feels more natural. Many older adults describe this as thinking with less strain and more confidence. That's the shift we're aiming to understand here. And to do that, we'll look closely at how specific everyday signals interact with memory systems, starting with the most basic ones people usually underestimate, and building step by step from there in the next section. Now let's count down the science-backed foods that support memory and brain health after 60, starting with the mildest signal and moving step by step toward the ones aging brain cells respond to most clearly. Pay close attention to the order, because if you're over 60, sequence often determines whether the brain simply maintains itself or actually strengthens memory over time. And here's the question to keep in mind as we begin. Why do so many people eat brain-healthy foods, yet still feel stuck, as if the brain almost responds but never fully does? Number 6. Leafy greens. Gentle support without direction. Leafy greens support brain health by reducing oxidative stress and improving blood flow, two processes that help protect neurons from gradual, age-related damage. This protection matters, especially after 60, because oxidative stress quietly accelerates memory decline long before symptoms feel obvious. In everyday life, this looks like adding spinach, kale, or arugula to meals a few times per week, preferably lightly cooked to improve nutrient absorption and digestion. For adults over 60, consistency matters more than quantity, and anyone using blood-thinning medication should keep intake steady rather than fluctuating week to week. The result is a calmer internal environment for the brain, fewer stress signals, less background damage, and better circulation. But here's what many people miss. Protection alone doesn't strengthen memory. At this stage, the brain feels safer but not sharper. Many people stop here believing they've done enough, and later wonder why recall or focus hasn't truly improved. Which raises the natural curiosity. If protection is only the first step, what actually tells the brain to move forward and respond? Number 5. Extra virgin olive oil. Keeping brain connections flexible. Extra virgin olive oil supports memory by keeping brain cell membranes flexible, allowing signals to travel more smoothly between neurons. After 60, these membranes naturally stiffen, slowing communication between brain cells even when nutrients are available. This stiffness doesn't cause obvious symptoms at first, but over time it makes thinking feel heavier and recall feel less fluid. Olive oil helps counter this process by improving membrane flexibility, which directly affects how efficiently information moves through memory networks. Using 1 to 2 tablespoons daily, ideally with meals, delivers steady brain support without overwhelming digestion or metabolism. This steady delivery is important because the aging brain responds poorly to extremes. If you're over 60 and managing cholesterol or blood pressure, moderation helps avoid excess calories while still gaining cognitive benefits. When used consistently, many people notice slightly improved focus and mental endurance. Conversations feel easier to follow. Reading feels less tiring. Mental effort feels lighter. Yet an interesting pattern appears here. Improvement shows up, but momentum does not. The brain works a bit better, but not decisively better. Memory feels smoother, but not stronger. This is often where people say, "I feel a little better, but not how I hoped." And that leads to another important question. If communication improves but memory still feels incomplete, what signal is the brain still waiting for? And this is where the countdown becomes more interesting, because the next step doesn't just protect the brain or lubricate communication. It begins sharpening how memory signals are sent and received, moving us from stability toward clarity. Number 4. Blueberries. Sharpening memory communication. Blueberries strengthen memory by improving how brain cells communicate with one another, a process that becomes increasingly fragile after 60. As we age, brain signaling pathways lose efficiency, meaning information may still exist in the brain but travels more slowly or less clearly. Blueberries are rich in polyphenols, natural compounds shown to protect and stabilize these communication pathways, especially those involved in learning, attention, and short-term memory. In simple terms, blueberries help brain cells hear each other more clearly. And here's the part most people overlook. Without clear communication, even a well-fed brain can feel scattered, slow, or mentally disorganized. Which raises an important question. What if many memory lapses aren't caused by forgetting, but by messages that arrive too distorted to be useful? A small handful of blueberries several times per week is enough to support this effect. Fresh or frozen both work well, because the polyphenols remain stable even after freezing. For adults over 60, regular exposure matters more than large portions, because the brain responds better to repeated familiar signals than to occasional excess. For seniors monitoring blood sugar, pairing blueberries with protein or healthy fats, such as yogurt, nuts, or seeds, helps maintain balance and prevents glucose spikes that can interfere with focus later in the day. This pairing becomes especially important after 60, when blood sugar swings have a stronger impact on attention and recall. Many people begin to notice clearer thinking, quicker word recall, and fewer mental pauses during conversations. Yet this improvement often triggers a new curiosity. If communication improves this much, what happens when the brain finally has enough energy to act on those messages consistently? That question matters because communication alone isn't enough. Signals may arrive clearly, but without adequate fuel, the brain still hesitates. It listens, but doesn't fully respond. This is why some people feel early progress with blueberries, then plateau. The message is clear, but the system lacks power. Which brings us to the point where many people feel encouraged, yet sense something is still missing. So what gives the aging brain the energy it needs to actually act on those clear signals? Number 3. Fatty fish. Fueling the aging brain. Fatty fish like salmon and sardines support brain health by improving how brain cells produce and use energy, while also reducing inflammation linked to cognitive decline. Omega-3 fatty acids play a critical role in mitochondrial function, the process that determines how efficiently brain cells convert nutrients into usable energy. After 60, this system often slows down quietly, even in people who eat well and stay active. The result isn't confusion, but fatigue. Thinking feels heavier, focus fades sooner, and mental stamina shortens. And here's a question worth pausing on. What if your memory isn't weak at all, but simply underpowered? Eating fatty fish about twice per week provides steady energy support without stressing digestion or metabolism. This frequency works well for older adults because it delivers consistent fuel rather than sharp spikes that the aging brain struggles to manage. If you're over 60 and taking blood thinners, spacing fish intake evenly through the week helps maintain balance and safety. When this support is in place, many people notice reduced mental fatigue, longer periods of sustained focus, and clearer thinking that lasts deeper into the day. This is often the moment people say, something is really changing now. They can read longer, follow conversations more easily, and stay mentally engaged without feeling drained. Yet even here, one final barrier often remains. Energy improves, communication sharpens, but memory still doesn't feel fully reliable day after day. Some days are noticeably better than others. That inconsistency creates a new and important curiosity. If the brain has clarity and fuel, what's still holding memory back from becoming stable? The answer usually isn't more stimulation or more effort. It's something quieter, something that determines whether the brain feels safe and calm enough to stay engaged consistently. And that's exactly the resistance we address next before memory can fully switch on and stay on. Number 2, walnuts. Quieting brain. Inflammation. Walnuts support memory in a way that's easy to miss because their effect isn't loud or immediate. Instead of stimulating the brain, they calm it. And that matters far more for memory after 60 than most people realize. Walnuts help reduce chronic, low-grade brain inflammation, a process strongly linked to cognitive decline, mental fatigue, and slower information processing. When inflammation stays elevated, brain cells struggle to communicate efficiently, even if other nutrients are present. In simple terms, the brain may have the tools it needs, but the environment is too noisy for clear memory signals to travel. And here's the question many people overlook. What if memory problems aren't always about weak signals, but about too much interference? A small daily portion of walnuts, roughly a handful, is enough to support brain health without adding excess calories. Consistency matters more than quantity, especially for adults over 60, because the anti-inflammatory effect builds gradually over time. Walnuts are rich in polyphenols and healthy fats that help stabilize the brain's internal environment, making it easier for memory pathways to function smoothly. For older adults with digestive sensitivity, chewing thoroughly or pairing walnuts with meals improves tolerance and absorption. This small adjustment alone can determine whether the brain actually benefits, which raises another curiosity. How many people quit too early simply because the signal never fully settled in? As inflammation quiets, many people notice subtle but meaningful changes. Emotional reactions feel less intense. Mental ups and downs become less frequent. There are fewer off days where thinking feels heavy or unfocused. This matters because emotional stress and inflammation are closely connected in the aging brain. When one calms down, the other often follows. And at this stage, memory doesn't necessarily feel sharper yet, it feels steadier. That steadiness is not the finish line, but it's a critical step most people skip. Which leads to an important question worth pausing on. If the brain finally feels calmer and clearer, what's the missing signal that tells memory systems to fully engage? Here's why walnuts hold the number 2 position. They don't turn memory on by themselves. Instead, they remove one of the biggest obstacles standing in the way. They create the conditions the brain needs to respond to stronger signals. Without this step, more activating foods may only work partially or temporarily. Many people unknowingly reverse the order, trying to stimulate memory before calming the system, and wonder why results fade. So the real curiosity at this point isn't whether walnuts help. It's what happens next, once inflammation is no longer blocking the message. And this brings us to the final step. If the brain is now calmer, more stable, and better able to listen, what signal finally tells it to switch memory chemistry fully on? Especially after 60? That's exactly where we're headed next. Number 1. Eggs, especially the yolk, activating memory chemistry. And finally, the most surprising one, because many people still underestimate how powerful this food is for memory, especially after 60. Egg yolks provide choline, a key nutrient the brain uses to produce acetylcholine, one of the most important neurotransmitters involved in memory, learning, and attention. This matters because acetylcholine levels naturally decline with age, and that decline is closely linked to slower recall, reduced focus, and mental fatigue. In simple terms, the brain may still want to remember, but it lacks the chemical messenger needed to send the signal clearly. And here's the question most people never consider. What if memory loss isn't about forgetting, but about messages that never fully get delivered? Eating eggs several times per week, ideally earlier in the day, helps support this memory chemistry naturally. Morning intake aligns with how the brain uses choline to support focus and recall throughout the day, which is why some people notice clearer thinking hours later rather than immediately. For adults over 60, this timing can make a meaningful difference because the aging brain processes nutrients more slowly and benefits from early, steady support. If you're managing cholesterol, current research supports moderate egg consumption for most people, especially when eggs are part of an overall balanced diet and individual response is monitored. That reassurance alone often surprises viewers and raises another important question. If this nutrient is so essential, why isn't it talked about more? The result of consistent egg consumption is not a sudden boost, but something more valuable and sustainable. Memory begins to feel less forced. Recall feels more natural. Focus holds longer without mental strain. Many people describe this shift as confidence returning, not just in memory, but in daily thinking, conversations, and decision-making. And here's the key insight that ties everything together. This is the point where the brain doesn't just protect itself anymore. It actively engages. It recognizes the signal as clear, familiar, and worth responding to. That's why this food sits at the top of the list. But there's one last detail most people miss. Even the strongest signal can weaken if it's used alone or out of context. Which leads to the final curiosity. What happens when this memory-activating signal is combined with the others in the right order and applied in a way that fits real life after 60? And this is where everything comes together. In the next section, we'll look at how to combine these science-backed memory-supporting foods into a simple daily routine that works in the real world, and why so many people miss the full benefit even when they're eating the right foods for brain health after 60. If you've been feeling forgetful, mentally tired, or quietly concerned about your memory lately, you're not alone. Many adults over 60 experience the same worries but rarely talk about them. The good news is that brain health after 60 is not fixed. The brain can still respond, adapt, and improve at any age when it receives the right kind of support. That realization alone can change how you approach memory health and healthy aging. Tell us in the comments how old you are and what your biggest health goal is right now, because your experience may be exactly what another viewer needs to hear today. And in just a moment, we'll bring everything together into a simple, realistic approach to supporting memory that fits real life. Before making any major diet or lifestyle changes, always check with your doctor, especially if you're over 60 or taking medication. With safe, consistent support, your brain and body can continue to adapt and improve far more than most people expect. If this video helped you, please like it and share it with someone who may need encouragement today. And stay with us as we turn these science-backed ideas into a clear, easy daily routine you can actually follow.